Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from the Parlay team, and in this video, I'm going to be going over a deep dive into the live roundtable. This is a synchronous verbal discussion that can happen in class or online. And I'm going to be going over some basic mechanics of how it works, but also some important strategies to get everyone talking in the discussion. So again, today we are doing a deep dive into the live roundtable. There are a couple other parts to Parlay, which we have PD resources for that you could check out. Just in a nutshell, the first part is the Parlay universe, and this is the big topic library that you can browse through and see examples of topics that relate to the subject area you're teaching. You could use these topics directly, or you can always make small edits or modifications to these activities and use them with your own students. So you can check that out. The second piece is the online roundtable, and this is the written discussion. So this is where students are logging on, they're responding to your discussion prompts with their own initial post. They all have a secret identity, and then they go in and they respond to their peers' ideas in an anonymous online discussion. There's really great data that you can get from this, and this could be run as a homework activity asynchronously, or it could be run in class as well. So it's pretty flexible. Today, again, we are focusing on the live roundtable, which is the verbal discussion that could happen in class or online, but it must happen synchronously, of course, because it is verbal. The main idea is for the live roundtable to encourage everyone to participate, give us a little bit more structure when we're running a student-driven discussion, as well as give us the data that we need to give each other feedback, reflect on our participation, and ultimately improve in our discussion skills as a class. So this guide that I'm going to be using as a base is available on our website, on Coach's Corner, actually. I'll show you where that is. So if you go to Book Free PD and you go to Coach's Corner, this is where you'll see those guides, specifically the guide to the live roundtable. So I'm not going to be going through all of this today. However, I'm going to be using it as a basis. So first off, why discussions? Why would you use your precious class time to run a student-driven discussion? Well, there's a few reasons. One is we know that discussions double student learning outcomes in comparison to some of the other common teaching strategies. So that's from John Hattie's research on visible learning. So we know that they're really impactful. Discussions also teach critical thinking skills, communication, and collaboration. So they allow a really good practice environment for students to develop those skills, particularly when it's student driven, of course. Discussions encourage us to be thoughtful and open minded citizens, and they allow us to see things from different perspectives. So that's another really critical piece. And then lastly, they also teach social awareness, empathy, and interpersonal relationship skills. And we know that a classroom community is really critical to boosting student engagement and sustaining it. So discussions are a really great way to build that class community. All in all, making these discussions student driven is going to allow more students to participate and more students to develop these skills in the classroom. However, discussions can be challenging. So there's four key reasons why they are challenging. They're typically inequitable. A lot of students will often see that a lot of students are sitting back and watching while some individual students kind of drive the discussion. The fact that they're student driven can be uncomfortable for students and sometimes for teachers as well. Discussions are hard to measure and assess over time. And then they're also difficult to facilitate in online and hybrid settings. So, with the live roundtable, the goal is to kind of get at some of these key challenges and make it easier for you as a teacher to run class discussions that are student driven. So, the tap in and cue system helps give everybody a voice and it adds a little bit more structure to allow students to jump into the conversation. There's built-in protocols and best practices to get students to actually jump in and participate, but also give feedback as well. There's automatic engagement tracking, so we could see that on a class-wide level and an individual student level. And then last but not least, it works in all learning environments. So whether you're in class or online or some mixture of both, this live roundtable will work for you. Now, in terms of the class context, we usually see live discussions are most ideal around 20 students. They certainly could work for about 30 students as well, or 10 students, somewhere in that range. Totally up to you and how your class kind of works with it the first time around. I would try the first one with your full class, and then if you think that the class should be split into two, then you could break the class into smaller groups and maybe have two discussions going on at one time, or have one group of students maybe doing a written discussion online using the online roundtable, and maybe having the second group doing the live roundtable with you. The live roundtable will work for various grade levels, starting from anywhere around grade 4 or 5, all the way up through to grade 12 and beyond, if you'd like. It works in class, it works online, and obviously in a blended format as well. So here's a visual of what it would look like in a physical classroom. We often encourage you to set up your class in a circle if it's possible, but any way that students can still look at each other, make eye contact, and have a discussion face to face is going to be ideal. Now, if you're using online, you can use the built-in audio, which we'll go over, or you can also have Zoom in the background if you wanted the video to show up. Now, for each individual subject area, the live roundtable might look a bit different. So here I've kind of outlined an example of a key question that you might use to start off your discussion, depending on that subject area. So for example, in English, why does Hamlet speak to himself more often? Why might we feel emotionally closer to a character who speaks to us directly? So discussion questions that are open-ended, that allow students to really share their opinions and share different ideas, and also kind of carry the discussion beyond just the text, allow for that analysis and prediction and higher order thinking skills. Now, for setting up the discussion, I'm going to start here on these slides, and then I'm actually going to jump into the tool itself so you can see what it looks like. But first off, you might be thinking, how can I actually fit a discussion into my unit planning or into the sequence of learning activities that I'm planning for? We often see that you can either incorporate this as like a weekly discussion or once per unit, or you could be using a quick discussion at the beginning of or end of class to get everyone on the same page. It's really flexible. What we see is really common is teachers will actually start with the online written discussion, maybe as a homework activity throughout the week as a way to prepare for the in-class live discussion. And then maybe we come to class on Friday and we'll actually do our live roundtable. We know everyone has prepared and read the resources and maybe shared their initial ideas, maybe even prepared some notes. And then we're going to actually have our discussion to ask deeper questions and go beyond some of the initial questions that we might have asked in the written discussion. So I'm going to go into Parlay. To log on, of course, you could always just go to parlayideas.com and log in. And this is going to ask you to log in with Google or Microsoft, or in this case, I'm going to log in with my own account. And when I log in, I'm going to see all of the courses that I have here. I can always create a new one from scratch. So I can do that. I'll just click new. I'm going to choose which course I'd like to add this live roundtable to. And then it's going to ask me, do I want to run a written discussion or a live? Today, we're going to focus on the live. So once I create the live roundtable discussion, it's going to show up listed here on the left-hand side with a little yellow dot beside it. That means I have not yet invited students. And so maybe I'm going to call this Thursday's live discussion. And the first thing that I'm going to do probably is come up with my discussion prompt. So I would click discussion prompt. I might want to include any sort of resources or guiding questions right in here. And once I add these questions, then I could simply make them visible right away to students, or I could turn them off and actually slowly release these questions as we go throughout. I can preset any polls that I'd like to drop out throughout the discussion. So you can add in any polls, save and close, save them as drafts, and push them out later. I'm going to use the queue system turned on. And then I'm going to invite students to this discussion. I could also turn on audio. If your class is remote or you have some students who are remote, you could turn on the audio, and this is going to ask every student to connect their microphone when they log on. And then we'll be able to hear each other through Parlay. We will not need Zoom or Google Meets in the background. We could simply use the audio connection here to be able to hear everybody. And then last but not least, I can go and invite students. So when you invite students, you just click invite there at the top. And the easiest way is simply to copy the link and share it with the group. You could also share the code as well. And if you're working with Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, or any of the other learning management systems, and you can click those buttons and it will automatically post that link in your selected class. The students will click that link, it'll open up in a new tab for them, and they could log on. I'm actually going to set up a discussion that was already kind of done. I'm going to make a copy of it actually. So here I'm going to come up here and make a copy of this discussion that I'd like to work with. So I'm going to make a copy into my social studies class. Now I go into my social studies class. Let's see, social studies. And this is where I can use the deep dive discussion. I could rename it here up at the top. We're going to call it Thursday. I'm going to check out my prompt so I can have my presentation slides here, the universe. I could choose which question we'd like to start with. I typically like to start with an icebreaker discussion. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but essentially, this topic, or an icebreaker, is a really good way to get everybody to tap in the first time around, get everybody comfortable with how this works, and then we'll actually jump in to the actual discussion questions. I would say the last thing before inviting students that I didn't mention already is you can edit the sentence stems. So if you have specific sentence stems that you'd like to outline of what a new idea is, what to build on, what a challenge or what a question is, you can save those. Those are going to appear on the student notepad. All right, so I've just created this discussion. I'm ready to invite my students. So I'm going to copy the link and share it out with a bunch of my students here. Alrighty. So I've invited a bunch of my students. They should get that notification now. And as a student, I can come in, I can click the link, and this is going to bring me right into my discussion right here. Now, the discussion has not yet started, so the students might be prompted to check out the guiding questions, look at the resources, maybe even take a few notes before the discussion starts. We find that that really helps to get students comfortable and having ideas that they'd like to be ready to speak up and share. When you're ready to start the discussion, you can click start and you could also check in and see which students are logged in on the side here. So we have Alex, we have Alice, Angela, and Elisa. Only Alex right now is logged in. The other ones we're still waiting for. Now, when we start the discussion, on the student screen, it's going to look something like this. They will have four options to tap into the discussion. So now we're all sitting around the room, or maybe we're doing this online and we have the audio turned on, and students are going to choose one of these four buttons when they have something to say. So, for example, Alex has a new idea. He's going to tap in, he has something to say, and then if we want to hear from Alex, we can click that ear icon. Now, as a teacher, if I see that Alex is ready to go, then I'm going to go ahead and add him to the queue. And we can see that Alex is now the speaker. And now when other students tap in, we can add them to the queue as well. So we have a structure for who's going to speak next. Once Alex is done, he on his screen will see you are the speaker, but when he's done, he's going to tap out. Now, if Alex tapped in and maybe he forgot what he was going to say or somebody else mentioned his idea and he's not actually going to speak up, he can click I did not speak and that will also tap him out of the queue and it will not log his participation in that time. As a teacher, as the discussion's going on, I can click any student in my list or I can click their name or their icon, and this is going to bring up my assessment window. So this is where I could see how many times the student has tapped in. Right over here in tap in details, I can see the private notes that the student has written. In student notes, I can give that student feedback. I can use suggested feedback that Parlay automatically generates for me, or I could put in some of my feedback templates. If I typically give a common piece of feedback to students, then I can add that there. And of course, I could make my own teacher notes and I could use these assessment criteria to get the discussion started as well. I can nudge Alex if I wanted to say, hey, that was a really great idea, or hey, do you have something to say? I can send him a private one-way nudge throughout the discussion to get him to speak up. And he'll see that right there on the bottom. All right. So as a discussion is going on at any time, you might see that there are many students kind of waiting in the middle here, but then our queue system is going to be our structure for who's going to speak next. At any time, I can remove these students from the queue and I could reorder if I'd like. Or, especially if you're using small groups, multiple small groups, you could assign a student as the moderator. So I might come here and assign Alex as the moderator of this discussion. And now Alex will be able to add and remove students to the queue. And of course, this is going to help make it a little bit more student driven as well. Once the discussion is over, I can click stop, and this is going to pause the discussion. And everyone on their screen is going to see a class summary and a student summary. So for students in the student summary, you can pull this up and on the board, and you can take a few minutes and actually debrief with this with the group, talk about how the discussion went, and consider how we might actually improve for next time. So first we see 72 participation rate. That's a really great starting point. However, we might want to shoot for 80 next time. We could see the time spent tapped in, the circle, and we could also see the time spent as the speaker. So we could think about this and think about the balance of who was speaking in the discussion, and we could always use these reflection questions to prompt that little reflection. So, what does this graph tell us? Is there any students who were tapped in significantly longer than others? Or how can we make this conversation more balanced in the future? We could see the average tap-ins per student. We could see the number of new ideas, challenges, build-ons, and questions. Here we'll see suggestions as well from Parlay. So, next time maybe we should try building on each other's ideas more. We only built on each other's ideas once in the discussion, so you can always click out and see those resources that are suggested. So, build on ideas, for example. Here are some sentence stems and some ideas that we could use as starters next time if we wanted to focus on building on ideas. And then last but not least, we will see a tap-in summary for the whole class, and we could even filter to see, oh, who is the one who built on ideas? Okay, that was Alice. And again, use this to help us understand participation on the individual and the whole class level. And then last but not least, teachers have access to this individual summary that they could use to see the key metrics of how many minutes tapped in, what was the total number of tap-ins, how many new ideas, challenge, build-ons, or questions. All of this data you can export into a CSV file or a Google Sheet as well. And by the time you're watching this video, it might be possible actually to connect it back to your learning management system. So we're working on that right now, and ideally you'll be able to send that data back. All right. So now thinking about some different strategies that you might actually use to run the discussion. Let's see here. So sometimes the first discussion could feel a little awkward. And so there's a bunch of different strategies we could use to actually encourage everybody to speak up and really improve. The live roundtable is something that you definitely improve across time as a class and individually. So first, we do have this guide, which is a really good guide to introduce to students to help with that live roundtable participation. So if you click download guide here, this is also available on our website in the resources section. We have a student textbook that helps introduce students to live discussions and what the key parts of a live discussion are. We're going to listen to understand, we're going to encourage other people to participate, we're going to require evidence, and we're also going to speak up with new ideas, and we're going to challenge ideas respectfully and ask thoughtful questions to push the discussion forward and build on ideas. So all of these ideas are kind of brought together in the student textbook, which is a really good resource maybe before your first discussion or afterwards. Another really good one is our introductory videos. If you click the question mark here at the top, students can do this as well, then you could see the introductory videos for students or teachers. We also have that student textbook linked here. We have some sentence stems, some other examples of how you can use the live roundtable. So all those video tutorials are ready. They're also available on our YouTube channel as well. All right. Now, secondly, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but it's really helpful to use the circle of voices the first time around as a strategy to get everyone talking and get everyone comfortable with that cue kind of format in the discussion. So you might ask a very simple question like, if you could travel anywhere in the world with an unlimited budget, where would you go? Have everyone tap in with a new idea, add all of the students to the queue one by one as they're going through, and then, of course, when the student is in the speaker position, they would share their answer, tap out, and then quickly allow the next student to participate. If you're reading a novel, you might ask, okay, who was your favorite character in the novel this time around? And you might have them jump in and have each student jump in with their favorite character, go through, and then get into your deeper questions after that. Another strategy that's really helpful is co-creating class norms or goals. So depending on your preference, you could either set norms that are kind of like expectations, or you can set some class-wide goals. What I typically do is I'll come up with 2 or 3 goals as a group. We'll write them on the board, and we might even pause the discussion partway through, look at our goals, and see if we're going to achieve them. So, for example, how long might we discuss for? Maybe we'll try discussing for 15 minutes without the teacher intervening in any awkward silences. Or we might be shooting for 80% participation rate, and maybe we're looking to actually ask a lot of questions in our discussion or focus on building each other's ideas. So, putting those goals up on the board or having them somewhere visible, you could even put them in your prompt if you wanted, and referring back to them can really help the class achieve those as a group and really build that class community over time. Next, you could assign roles as well. This is really helpful, especially if you have lots of different personalities in the group and you have students who are ready to kind of practice different skills. You can choose a student and kind of give them a very specific role to help develop this skill, but also help organize the discussion in a different way as well. So the moderator is the most obvious. That's the one that you can do actually in the live roundtable, and you could set the moderator, and that student can add students to the queue and remove them. Now you can have a student only ask questions in the discussion. A lot of times, if we have a particular student who tends to dominate and jump in and is super eager, you might ask them to consider specific questions that they could ask to encourage other people to speak up. So focus on that specific skill of pushing the discussion forward. You can do the same thing for the challenger or the builder on ideas. And of course, you can track all of that information of which one you need more. Do we need more challengers? Do we need more build ons? And then last but not least, you can have a scribe. So you can have a student who does not speak and they take notes on the quality of the discussion on their notepad, or maybe they're responsible for checking in with the goals and seeing if the class is on track to actually meet those class wide goals. This could be really helpful if you have a student who's very hesitant to speak up in the discussion. You could have them start off as a scribe and maybe focus on that specific task before they actually join in and jump into the discussion verbally. Now, if you have a hybrid setup, it might be helpful for you to project the students who are on Zoom on the screen. You might want to play the audio on the speakers for the class to hear and simply only use one microphone for the whole class. So that might help reduce that echo. And then when someone in the classroom is speaking, you could just mute the sound to eliminate the feedback loop. Um, yeah. Another strategy, you might want to pause and reflect partway through the discussion. This is really helpful, again, if you want to check in on those class goals, you want students to think about their own participation. You might want to ask a question like, okay, look at your own student summary before we restart. Could you contribute more? Should you speak up more in the discussion? Or should you be letting a little more room for other people to speak up? Lastly, actually, second lastly, there's you could do a think, pair, share, and you could have do a little think, pair, share before the discussion starts, and get students a little bit more comfortable talking to each other about their ideas and brainstorming. You could do time boxing, so start with just a quick 10-minute live roundtable at the end of class. And maybe tomorrow we're going to try 15. And by next week, maybe we'll try and lead up to 30 minutes. So over time, getting students more comfortable with talking for longer and driving the discussion on their own. And then we also have a back channel in the chat as well. So if you wanted to keep the back channel on, you could turn that little notch on in the course group chat. And this is going to allow for students to send messages to the chat instantly. This could be helpful if you have a student who needs to troubleshoot or ask a question or jot down an idea that they have and you want everybody to see. You could also turn off the chat and only the teacher has access to send messages to the group. All right. So with that, there's a couple ways that you could wrap up the discussion. So you could have students reflect on their own notepad at the end of the discussion and prompt that once the discussion's finished. Of course, all of the notes are going to remain there on in the live roundtable, which you can export. You can have them look at their own personal reflection in the discussion at the end, or if you paused halfway through, and this is what that looks like. They could see how many times they spoke, they could see the type of tap in, and they could see the feedback and observations from the teacher, of course. Of course, you could do your group reflection and use some of the prompting questions to guide a discussion to reflect on participation as a group. As a teacher, you could always go back in afterwards and give feedback and do assessment. If you didn't have time to do it on the fly, you could always go back and do that afterwards. And like I mentioned, you can export all the data from the live roundtable, just like you can in the online roundtable, back to Google Drive, CSV file, and hopefully by the time you're watching this, you're back to your learning management system as well. So that's a wrap. You can always come back to the chat bubble and ask questions at any time if you have any questions. And you can also find this actual resource that you can go through and walk through on your own in the teacher resource folder or in our coach's corner, which is right here. So you could download the slides. That's all for now. I hope that this was informative for you. Again, if you have any questions, just let us know and we will be here to help you.